I'm used to the idea of recycling. It's not a new concept to me, and I kind of like the notion that many of the plastic products that we use can be broken down and turned into other useful items that will then be broken down again. It's a process that is efficient both for humans and for the planet, and has been so for a very long time. It's the recycling of entertainment that I can't stand. Because while the recycling of plastic products indicates a desire to be as efficient as possible, the recycling of entertainment denotes laziness and non-creativity. This has been happening so often lately that I'm no longer surprised or even really dismayed by it. Every major franchise that I know has been redone, taken apart, and put back together like some bizarre, grotesque zombie stumbling through the fentanyl hell that is Southern California. From Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Terminator, every Disney animated film known to man, Willow, Doctor Who, Star Trek, Indiana Jones, and on and on and on. It is a never-ending cycle of good films being dragged out of the closet, torn apart, remade like Frankenstein, but in a much more horrifying way than Mary Shelley ever would have intended. I don't know what it's going to take for the carnage to stop, and I really don't know how long it's going to take to return things to some semblance of normal. The only thing I can really do is return to watching the movies and shows I loved from my childhood and dream of the good old days when I didn't feel dread turning on my television or going to the movies. And speaking of older movies that I used to love and still do that seem to be getting a facelift from hell, let's talk about Pirates of the Caribbean. Before we dive into the nonsense that will be this new updated for modern audiences version, I think it's worthwhile to discuss the original trilogy and just what was so amazing about it. I have heard people speculate that the first movie was the peak of the trilogy, and the first one does have a special place in my heart for obvious reasons. It's an adventure, a romance, a ghost story, a comedy, and a slick action thriller all wrapped in one. And all of that was because of one man. When I first saw this scene as a kid, I knew I was in for one heck of a movie. I don't know how Johnny Depp embodied the character so well, but though not a word was said for a cool 2 minutes after his first appearance, Bruckheimer and everyone on that production team demonstrated that they know what they were doing with this character. Johnny Depp was charismatic, charming, suave, clever, resourceful, and pragmatic as Jack Sparrow. He also didn't neglect a sense of moral code that was the theme of the entire first movie. He didn't hesitate to help others, but only when it benefited him, and the movie taught us to know that no matter what, Jack Sparrow always had a plan. And on the rare occasion that he did not, he was able to talk his way out of every problem and come out smelling like a rose. His reasoning skills were both effective and hilarious, and he used them to manipulate Barbossa and the British Navy to its greatest effect. Not to mention that some of the one-liners that are used and recycled throughout the trilogy are both meme-worthy and iconic. Despite the fact that the first movie is over 20 years old, the CGI on it still stands up relatively well and genuinely disturbed me the first time that I watched it. It had a tight, well-written story that, while long, still felt efficient in nature. I never felt like a line or scene should have been edited out. Each character was memorable and well-planned, and I loved them all. In particular, I have to give a certain level of praise to Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley as Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann. They played the part of a young couple unsure and uneasy about love incredibly well. Will, having been sure of his feelings for years, takes a stalwart approach to rescuing Elizabeth, even though he knows that it will likely never win him her love. He's willing to compromise his morals by working with a pirate in order to ensure her safety, and he is the sort of character that when he makes up his mind about something, nothing can change it. Will is a bit of a naive character first starting out. He is excellent with a sword, as is demonstrated in this masterful sword fight with Jack, but about his own family and the makings of the world he is very unaware. For this reason, he is willing to follow Jack's directives and tag along until he gets what he is after, which is the rescue and safety of Elizabeth. As for Elizabeth, well, she's another heroine that I will add to my ever-growing list of awesome female characters. Most of these ladies are from decades-old movies, but there are some who are more recent, and I will swear by them in every video I do about feminism and the like. Elizabeth is a bit like Will, sheltered and a bit untested when it comes to the rougher aspects of the world. Unlike today's so-called boss babes, she is not a physically dominant presence. She is completely at the mercy of the pirates when it comes to physical strength, and she doesn't insult herself or the audience by thinking that she can free herself through single combat and winning against them like some other Disney movies that I know. It is never once implied that Elizabeth has control of the situation in any way that would make her seem like one of today's heroines. She's not easy to push around and clever when it counts, She is not cowed into cowardice by the pirates, but instead is just one of those realistic human beings that used to be part of movies before everyone decided that the best way to demonstrate feminism would be to punch people and sing awkward songs that no one asked for or wanted. She demonstrates resourcefulness when she decides to get Jack drunk and use his absence to burn their supplies to signal the Royal Navy. She is also willing to put her reputation and even her life on the line for Jack at the end of the movie because she recognizes that he was an integral part of rescuing her. And even though I wish Norrington hadn't gotten the short end of the stick in those movies, it is understood that Elizabeth never wanted to hurt him. And if they had simply decided to end the trilogy there, well, he wouldn't have been too bad off. Of course, they didn't, and I love them for it, because after the first outing of Captain Jack Sparrow, I was dying to see more. So when Dead Man's Chest came out in 2006, I was all over it. Once more, we got reintroduced to a Jack Sparrow that was witty and clever, but who also had a price on his head from one of the best CGI villains that I have ever seen in cinema, Davy Jones. I don't know how Bill Nighy managed to pull off this performance, but I can't watch him in these movies and then see him in Love Actually and not have a hard time thinking that they are the same people. He stole the show for me in the last two films. The rage, the insanity, the bitterness, the ruthlessness, the heartbreak, and all of it conveyed through pounds of CGI that looked more real and lifelike than anything Marvel has put out in the last 5 years. The amount of emotion that is conveyed with the use of these CGI tentacles still blows my mind because this film is almost 20 years old. The phrase, "the eyes are the windows to the soul," is a common one, but I was able to tell more about what Davy Jones was thinking and feeling through the use of tentacles more than anything else. Of course, the performance Bill gave is still one of the great villain performances that I have seen, and the lines that he uses are still as iconic as the ones of Jack Sparrow. We got to see a darker side to the movie franchise of selling souls, the legend of Davy Jones' locker, and the Kraken than we were expecting, and I ate up every single minute of it. Every character was tricking the other, and no one really knew what each other's motives were. None of us knew who was going to win out in the end, and everyone seemed to be pretty evenly matched. The plot kept you guessing right up until the end of the film, and they concluded the second movie in such a way that it had my jaw on the floor, because I never thought that they would go in that direction. When I first saw Dead Man's Chest, At World's End hadn't been released yet, so I had to wait months to see the conclusion to the trilogy and find out what had happened to Jack, Elizabeth, Will, and a recently resurrected Barbossa. One of my favorite things about these films is that despite the seriousness of the situation, they still managed to retain their humor throughout, with each character being afforded moments of levity that don't feel shoehorned in or out of place. There are a lot of profound lines in the film trilogy that I still think about to this day, and some that are pretty much meme-worthy at this point.
Come to negotiate, eh? Have you slimy git? Look what I got. I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt, and guess what's inside it?
Which leads me to the news of the day that apparently a 6th Pirates film is in the works. One that doesn't include Johnny Depp, somehow. I guess Disney felt he was too controversial to keep around, even though he was vindicated at the end of the trial with his ex-wife. The less said about her, the better. I don't know who they are going to try to get to fill the shoes of the iconic pirate, but whoever they decide to procure won't be enough. It's established at this point that no one can play Jack Sparrow but Johnny Depp, and if anyone tries, it's kind of tantamount to cinematic blasphemy. Kind of like what they did with Indiana Jones. I've heard rumors that Margot Robbie will be stepping into the Jack Sparrow adjacent role, or that this actress that I have never heard of might be taking the reins, although I think this has been debunked at this point. Although it doesn't really matter which actress they end up deciding to cast. In the end, it's simply math. No Johnny Depp equals no Jack Sparrow equals no Pirates of the Caribbean. You can make a Pirates of the Caribbean movie without Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann and Barbossa, but you cannot make one without Johnny Depp. He made the character what he is, and I don't think it's unreasonable to say that it is in his top 5 most iconic roles. The fact that they are even discussing replacing him with some female actress in an adjacent role is, as I said, cinematic blasphemy. But it wouldn't be the first time that Disney has shot themselves in the foot in the last few years. What I really want to know is, if they were so desperate for cash, if they really didn't want to create anything new and were content to rest on their laurels and hope that it would coast them to success once again, then why didn't they consider a prequel movie that told the backstory of Davy Jones and Calypso? Other than Will and Elizabeth, these two are the most dynamic couple in the Pirates franchise, and they only had a handful of scenes together. This scene of the two of them in the brig of Davy Jones' ship conveyed more love, hate, heartbreak, and sorrow than most feature-length love stories that I have seen. It was brilliantly acted by Bill and Naomi Harris, and I still come back to it to this day to listen to the dialogue and hear the soundtrack that accompanies it. So why didn't they make a film about these two? It's practically right up Disney's alley with the agenda that they are trying to push these days. A strong, empowered woman of color and a man who falls head over heels in love with her. The amount of money I would pay for a movie about these two is astronomical. Far more than any random cents I would spend on an all-female Pirates movie with a strong, empowered, diverse female Jack Sparrow who wouldn't have half the charisma or charm that Depp did in the role. And that's probably why this news is so disheartening to hear. The Pirates sequels, while being goofy and unnecessary, didn't really do anything to degrade the characters featured in them. With this new Pirates film, it is all but a guarantee with the departure of Johnny Depp. With the 3 original movies, the level of professionalism, talent, and care that went into those films still amazes me to this day. There was enough fantasy and magic to keep me on the edge of my seat, but the dialogue was grounded and clever enough that it didn't feel unbelievable or unrealistic. Next to Lord of the Rings and Indiana Jones, the Pirates of the Caribbean films are some of my favorite films of all time. And since there have already been updated for modern audiences installments of these franchises, it was only a matter of time before the diverse curse was cast upon these iconic movies as well. As it stands, who is going to play the female lead is still up in the air. But I really don't care who it ends up being because it is a guarantee at this point that it will be bad. The dialogue will not have the charm and charisma of the original movies, and they will try to throw the iconic music over scenes in a desperate attempt to get fans fired up, but it will just end up feeling tacky and try hard. However, what it looks like they are planning to do is cast an actress under the mantle of one of the only female pirates ever recorded, Anne Bonny. Anne Bonny was a red-headed Irish woman who was very active in the 1700s in the pirate world. And apparently the woman they have chosen to play Anne Bonny is this lady right here. This news comes after Disney made it plain that they wanted to make a female-led Pirates of the Caribbean film. My final question was, simply, who asked for this? No one had any interest in another Pirates movie unless Depp was back in the role, and even then, they likely would have surrounded him with a million female characters whose only role would have been to demonstrate how much better they are than him. So maybe it's a good thing that he won't be back, so they can humiliate him. Instead, they'll just race swap a character and slap the name of an actual historical figure on this delusional brainchild of a Disney exec for the purposes of representation and nothing else. I don't know what's going on or who is thinking what at this point, but at this point I have given up on trying to. And until the ESG money runs out and the wealth of BlackRock runs dry, Disney is dead and has turned into a zombie. Now we're all just waiting for the body to hit the floor. And like the curse of the dead man's chest, I hope all the gold medallions have found their way back into the treasure so they can't be resurrected. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on a 6th Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Also, let me know what are your favorite scenes from the Pirates films, and let the conversations begin. Until next time, everyone.